Hey there, BookTube. Noah and Yasmin from To the Lit House. How you doing?
Hello. Good.
We are back again.
Yep.
We're back again for some more Borges. We can't get enough, guys.
We can't.
Sundays with Borges, right? That's what
Mm-hmm.
that's
That's what
we're
we're
trying
calling
to
it.
do it. We're
Is
trying
that
to
what
do it.
the playlist is called?
Well, I haven't created a hashtag or anything, but we're trying to do it consistently on Sundays, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, things come up. But this is an amazing collection, and today we're going to go right at a story that's in the second part of fictions, um, the collection called Artifices, and it is Death and the Compass. What a riveting, awesome story! Very very unique, I
Very
think,
unique. Very
for
unique.
Borges.
Yes, for Borges because he usually doesn't write murder mysteries, and this is essentially what this is.
Yeah, this kind of thing. It was very unexpected. Well, I mean, when I first read it, it wasn't unexpected. Now that I've gotten so much more, I'm like, wow, that's. Upon revisiting it, I was telling Yasmin before the stream that I was surprised at how awesome this story is. Like just revisiting it, Borges is endlessly revisitable, and you pull more stuff out, and just it's so enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that rereading Borges is always, a new experience. But also rereading murder mysteries is isn't always great because you know what happens, but it's great in the sense that you get to see the clues and knowing the ending, know what the detective is thinking, which you don't always get to do once you're reading it
Right.
for the first time. So,
Cool. So, in typical Borges fashion, he does give you everything at the end of this story.
oh yeah.
And the everything that he gives you turns out to be about only half the story. There's this whole level of just this
Mhm.
heady, imaginative mind exploration that he just leaves you with, and you're thinking again. So let's get to it.
Yep.
Death in the Compass, we start off with a detective. His name is Lon Rote. How did you pronounce it?
Lawn rod, lawn
Yeah,
rod
I fall to the typical bookish thing where you read a name, you read
in
things,
your
and then you
mind.
don't ever say it out loud. So
Mm-hmm.
I found that with a lot of these names in this one, so I
Yes,
might
me
just be
too.
pronouncing them all over the place. But Lon Rote is a detective, and this case that we're going to be following is so strange, so rigorously strange, one might say, as the periodic series of bloody deeds that culminated in the Villa Triste Leroy amid the perpetual fragrance of the eucalyptus. So Eric Lonrote is a detective that it gives you some information right at the beginning, and there's this guy, Red Scarlac, who
Mm-hmm.
has um, made it his vow to kill Lonrote, and Lonrote has never allowed himself to be intimidated. He thought of himself as a reasoning machine, an August Dupin, but there was something of the adventurer in him, even of the gambler. So we get a pretty uh, nice little swath painting our main character, what his temperament is, how he kind of sees himself, and that he's a smart dude. He's
Mm-hmm.
an intellectual.
Yeah.
He would rather live in that kind of world than in the trenches, but he also is in the trenches. His job is a detective, and he's on this murder mystery here.
Mm-hmm.
So this narrative is very strong, shocking. We're going to be following a murder mystery. I'm going to kick it off in just a second, but it subverts the reader's expectations very, very well. And I just wanted to make sure everybody knows what kind of story we're about to get into before we start saying some pretty dark stuff. So first murder, they find that guy. He's a scholar. He's a Jewish rabbinical scholar, and he's found dead with a knife in his chest. His Lon Rote's partner says there's no need to go off on wild goose chases here. We all know that the Tetrarch of Galilee, that's what he's calling this guy who has been murdered, owns the finest sapphires in the world. Somebody intending to steal the sapphires, broken here by mistake. Yarmolonsky, that's his name, the murdered guy, woke up and the burglar had to kill him. What do you think? And he says, possible, but uninteresting. And we see that Lon Rote is not, he's not interested in
that
easy,
hypothesis. Yeah,
yeah,
and yeah,
even if they
so
make sense.
right, even if it makes sense. And so I don't think I mentioned it, but I love murder mysteries. And when we're being introduced to these characters, I immediately thought, I don't know if you've read any Sherlock Holmes, but I immediately thought, okay, we have this guy who's the typical Scotland Yard kind of person that goes for the traditional method and the easiest solution, and then the detective that's sort of almost of an outcast in terms of his way of thinking, very logical, cerebral, intellectual, like you said, but also kind of arrogant.
Right,
And he says that's not an interesting hypothesis. So,
right,
we should look at the books that this guy wrote and has on display instead of looking at the very likely, very simple hypothesis that the other guy proposes.
right. And so yeah, and arrogant is a good word to use as far as how we see him dealing even with his partner.
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna bore that out a little bit more for sure. Um, the guy, his partner, Treverinus, something like that,
Yeah.
Treverinus. He says, I'm interested in catching the blackguard that stabbed this unknown man because they don't know anything about him. And Lon Rote says, unknown. Here are his complete works. The list of his works are A Vindication of Kabbalah, The Study and Philosophy of Robert Flood, a literal translation of the Sefer Yetzirah, a biography of the Baal Shem, and a history of the Hasidim, a monograph in German on the Tetragrammaton, and another on the divine nomenclature of the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. So we have a lot of Kabbalah, we have a lot of mystical Judaism, we have a lot of real deep mystery even in those
Mm-hmm.
texts. And I don't know what would be meant by a literal translation of the Sefer Yetzirah, because that's a oxymoron. You know what I mean? There's no literal. It is symbolic. It is allegory at best. If not just complete mystical language. This kind of stuff is hard to work into, but it
Mm-hmm.
immediately intrigues our main character, and he packs
Mm-hmm.
up all those texts and takes them home. Before they leave, they see on the typewriter of them the first letter of the name has been written, and Lon Rote resists a smile. Suddenly turned bibliophile or Hebraist, he ordered one of the officers to wrap up the dead man's books and took him to his apartment. Indifferent to the police investigation, he set about studying them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then just half a page down, a young man came to him wanting to talk about the murder, but Lon Rote preferred to talk about the many names of God.
Right. So he's focusing on these obscure books that he finds that nobody but him and this guy that's dead know about, basically, in this story, at least.
Right, as
Um,
as if the texts that this guy are carrying are his only
are
clues.
right, that they're the clues to the crime, and he chooses to go down that path and just read those books, and um, yeah,
And he is. He's
very.
held up. He's held up in his apartment for a month. A month later, just so that knows, that first murder takes place on December 3rd.
Hmm.
A month later, January 3rd, in the emptiest and most godforsaken of the echoing suburbs in the western outskirts of the capital, sometime around dawn, one of the mounted guard armies that patrolled the solitudes of those blocks saw a man wrapped in a poncho lying in the doorway of an old paint factory. His hard face looked as though it were wearing a mask of blood. A deep knife wound split his chest. There's words written in paint around this guy. The second letter of the name has been written.
Hmm.
So at that point in reading, my alarm bells went off. You know, what name? The second letter of the name. What name? And with the Kabbalah and the especially that one that is the that is a monograph in German on the Tetragrammaton. I had an idea that I knew what kind of name Borges was talking about, because the Tetragrammaton is a four-letter name, um, that is the name of God. Now, the Tetragrammaton literally just means a name with four letters. That's
Hmm.
what it is. That's what it means. The word Tetragrammaton. The 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 name itself is Yod Hey Vav Hey, and it is unutterable. There's not a pronunciation that we know of that is exact, you know, like that we know for certain that that's what it is. Because did they say it aloud, or did they, because they called it the Tetragrammaton, they didn't pronounce this. Um, we have pronunciations that come down to us through history and stuff. One is Jehovah. Jehovah is Yod Hey Vav Hey. The Yod is a J H V H, but also Yahweh, Y H W H. So there's different translations of it like that. But just those four letters is just like what is what more clues in the mystery here.
Hmm.
And our boy Lone Road is just becoming completely wrapped in this mystery. This
Yes.
is the way to figure it out.
Hmm. And by now, most readers will be reading this and not really understand what he refers to when he says the name. And they won't really know what the books really mean. So we don't know what the detective's thinking, and we don't know what conclusions he's getting to. So he locked himself up for a month in his apartment reading these books. But what we get is the next crime. We don't get that part where he's trying to figure everything out. Sort of
Right,
happening behind the scenes.
right. Yeah, he's just in between these murders that are 1 month in between them. He's just, I mean, what is he doing? Well, he's in his apartment reading all these books.
Right.
You know,
And what
it's
we get is
ridiculous.
just the crimes and
And right
the
after
clues.
that, I mean, I pretty much gave the whole second crime there, but the third crime takes place on the night of February 3rd. So we just jump a month ahead.
Hmm.
And there was a call that comes into the police station and says, I can give you some well, I'll just give it exactly. Said that for reasonable fee he was willing to reveal certain details of the two sacrifices. Azvedos, the second murdered person, and Yarmolinsky, who is the first one. A cacophony of whistles and party horns drowned out the informer's voice. Then the line went dead. So they pack up and they haul ass to this hotel where where the call came in from. The owner had the following to say, and it's really almost procedural like that in parts. This story, um, the owner had the following to say: colon, and then it gives 8 days earlier, Gryphus, a man with sharp features, Griffiths, a nebulous gray beard and a nondescript black suit, had rented a room above the bar. Finnegan, who generally put the room to use, that Trevianus had no difficulty guessing, had named an exorbitant rent that Griffius had unhesitantly paid. He almost never left the room. He had his lunch and dinner there, hardly ever showed his face at the bar. And then the night that he makes this phone call, he comes down, makes a phone call, a car shows up, two people get out that are completely drunk. They go up to his room, they all get drunk, stumble down, and they get in the car. Not before they write on the chalkboard, on a blackboard by the entryway, the last letter of the name has been written.
So the pattern
but that's the
continues.
third one, right? So then
And sorry, that
go,
feels almost like reading a police investigation report. That
right.
you said it
So we
was
have a
almost like procedural.
disappearance on the same day, a disappearance that is an assumed murder at this
Yeah.
point. So the third letter of the name has been written, and this is not adding up now, because, like I said, the tetragrammaton, that's a 4-letter word. That's what it means anyways. And that's the letters of the name. The third letter of the name is referred to here, and what's written down is the last letter of the name has been written, which just doesn't add up. And the partner, Longrote's partner, says, "What if tonight's story were a sham, a simulacrum?" Eric Lumrot smiled and in a grave voice read the commissioner's passage, which means, he added, the Jewish day begins at sundown and lasts until sundown of the following day.
Yeah.
The
So
other man made an attempt at. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that the evidence is the texts that he has again.
Right. That's the evidence, and these clues that are being placed by people. You know, they're meant to be seen. They're meant to be found out.
Right.
So the partner says, and that's the most valuable piece of information you picked up tonight then? And Lonrot says, no, the most valuable piece of information is the word that Ginsburg used on the phone. The guy that calls into the police office. And what word does he use? Sacrifices. He calls these murdered people sacrifices. So Lonrot is, by that, completely bought in. These aren't murders. These are ritual sacrifices. These are being done to invoke God in some kind of way. This is, he doesn't understand, and I don't understand. I mean, it's not, that isn't what, Kabbalah mysticism, Jewish mysticism is about, human sacrifices. But there's a huge occult element to Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah like that routinely gets this kind of reduction down, that it's people putting spells out there, pentagrams on the ground, maybe sacrificing blood sacrifices of some kind, that kind of craziness, and he's all into it.
Yes, he loves it.
So something else shows up at the police station after that, and it's a map. And Eric Lumrot studies this map and a letter. The 3 locations were equidistant, meaning like from the same distance from each other. These 3 places, December 3rd, January 3rd, and February 3rd. Symmetry in space as well, and in time. Lumrot sensed abruptly that he was on the brink of solving the riddle. A drawing compass and a navigational compass completed that sudden intuition. He smiled, spoke the word tetragrammaton, a word that he had recently acquired, and telephoned the commissioner. Thanks for the equilateral triangle you sent me last night. It was what I needed to solve the puzzle. Tomorrow, Friday, the perpetrators will be in prison. We can relax. The
Mm-hmm.
commissioner says, then they're not planning a fourth crime? He says, it is precisely because they are planning a fourth crime that we can relax. Lumrote smiled to think that the most famous of these criminals. Okay, then he goes to the
The place. To a
yeah,
place. We
what
don't really know where it is, right?
it is,
And
Villa Trist Leroy.
yeah, but we don't really know the meaning and why he's going, right? We're in the dark, and so is his partner. He doesn't really explain what he's doing.
He doesn't tell anybody. He just goes down
Mm-mm.
there. He wants to be the hero.
Again,
He's
he's
super
really
confident.
arrogant. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's super confident. He's ahead of the game. He's a one step ahead of these guys.
Yeah.
He's figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
While sitting in his sitting in his apartment
Reading.
for 3 months.
Right.
So he goes down there, and this is a really bad part of town. On the other side of the suburb, filled with factories where, under the protections of a Barcelona gangster, gunmen prosper. Lonrote smiled to think that the most famous of these criminals, Red Scarlac, the one that has vowed to kill him, would have given anything to know about his clandestine visit. As Azevedo had been one of Scarlac's gang, Longrote considered the remote possibility that Scarlac may be the fourth victim. But then he rejected it. He had virtually solved the problem. The mere circumstances, the reality, names, arrests, faces, paperwork, trial, and imprisonment, they all held very
Mm-hmm.
little interest for him now.
We have, yeah, again, he's really confident that what he figured out is the truth. And he even says disregarding reality, right? And he's also really detached from the crime itself. He just sees it as a puzzle. And once he figured out, or he thought he figured out what was happening and what the pattern was, he didn't really care about the victims or anything. So
Right.
it's really,
Yeah, he goes into the uh Trist Leroy, Villa Trist Leroy, and it is this huge castle like, and in true Borges fashion, it's a labyrinth.
mm-hmm,
He can't even, he doesn't, he loses his bearings. He chalks it up to that it's night, that he's alone and whatever, but he's searching this place. He's a day and a half ahead. It says, um, the thought occurred to him that one dawn and one sunset were all that separated him from the hour yearned for by the seekers of the name. So he gives these unknown murderers a name. They are the seekers of the name. Like, he's
mm-hmm.
just got it all figured out. He's got it all.
Yeah.
And he's walking around, and he's there's like a page of wonderful Borgesian wandering through the labyrinth of this castle, courtyards
Mm-hmm.
that are like each other's and stuff. And then two fierce, stocky men leapt upon him and disarmed him. Another, quite tall, greeted him gravely. You are so kind, and you have saved us a night and a day. It was Red Scarlac. The men tied Lonrote's hands. Lonrote found his voice. Scarlac, you're looking for the secret name? Even when he gets caught by this guy, he can't realize at first that he's been tricked.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks that
I must be
by
right.
some, he's still right, and that Scarlac is the one that is seeking the name of God, when he knows he's nothing but this gangster.
Mm-hmm.
It's so silly to me. But, just the irony, a wonderful irony Borges throws into this as well, right? So, Scarlac in typical, I guess, stereotypical villain fashion, goes on a monologue and gives him it all.
Yes. And this one's a great one.
Yeah, it's a great one too. He gives him the whole thing, and I'll just kind of touch on parts. The first term in the series, the first murder, was given to me quite by chance. Asvedo, the second murder, however, double-crossed us and got drunk on the money we advanced him to and pulled the job a day early. The job that he had advanced him to do is to steal the sapphires from the first guy.
Which, can I just say, um, the other detective, that's what the other detective had said, and the reason our detective didn't like that was because it had this component of randomness, and he didn't like things to be random, so that somebody would go steal something and accidentally walk into the wrong room, right?
Right, right.
But it turns out that that detective was right and that the simple solution was the real solution.
Yeah,
But it also shows how Lonro was going off of his own interests and who he was to solve that crime.
right,
His interests were Kabbalah and all that, these texts. So that's what he looked for. The clues were his, essentially,
right.
in that sense.
Yeah, exactly right. And they it was, hey, your thief, your thug thief over here is a screw up.
Hmm.
So he screwed up, that's the whole case. There's the explanation for what happened. So this is still Red Scarlac talking. He had just typed the words on his typewriter. The first letter of the name had been written. I read a history of the Hasidim. I learned from the Reverend, or he had heard that Longrote is actually reading all these texts.
Yeah.
He hears that he's like that. So he read the history of the Hasidim. I learned from the reverent fear of speaking the name of God that had been the origin of the doctrine that name is omnipotent and occult. I learned that some Hasidim, in the quest for that secret name, had gone so far as to commit human sacrifice. I realized that you would conjecture that the Hasidim had sacrificed the rabbi, and I set out to justify that conjecture.
And that's awesome. How the roles are flipped and the criminal learns about all these texts to understand the detective and what clues he would look for. And
And
also
well,
how,
for how
sorry?
many years had he, chased Longrote for real?
Yeah. And also how the plan of the crime or the pattern happens after the hypothesis of what happens. So the detective is looking for something, and so that's what becomes the crimes. The
Yeah,
hypothesis come before, and it's just great.
yeah, 3 years, 3 years to learn Longrote's temperaments and how he operates, and then just a chance, chance happening that he capitalizes and takes his opportunity to trap him. Um, I had repeatedly dropped clues so that you, the reasoning Eric Longrote, would realize that there were actually four letters to the name of God. One sign
Hmm.
in the north, two more in the east and west, demanded a fourth sign in the south. After all, the Tetragrammaton is the name of God. Yod He Vav He consists of four letters. Um, it was I who underlined that passage in Luzdin's book, the passage that says that Jews compute the day from sunset to sunset. So, I mean, he was orchestrating everything,
Hmm.
absolutely everything. And then Longrote is completely destroyed. He's face to face with his death, and he replies, and I'm just gonna go give the end of it now. There are 3 lines too many in your labyrinth, he says. I know of a Greek labyrinth that is but one straight line. So many philosophers have been lost upon that line that a mere detective might be pardoned for becoming lost on it as well. When you hunt me down in another avatar of your lives, Scarlac, I suggest that you fake or commit one crime at a second crime at B, 8 kilometers from a third crime at C, 4 kilometers from A and B and halfway between them, and then wait for me at D, 2 kilometers from A and C, once again halfway between them. Kill me at D, as you are about to kill me at Tris Leroy. And Scarlac replies, the next time I kill you, I promise you the labyrinth that consists of a single straight line that is invisible and endless. So he promises him the labyrinth of a straight line,
Hmm.
and and shoots him.
Yes.
And then the story's over. So fine. What do you think? What do you think?
I that's one of my favorite endings, I think. And
The ending that's no ending.
yes,
Here's
right. It's
Borges.
just gonna happen again and again,
Right.
which we see a lot. And Lonro keeps seeing it as this puzzle, and he thinks, what's the more elegant way of doing this? And you had three lines that didn't need to be there. You could have just done one line, and that was the labyrinth. So he's still thinking in terms, even when his life is at stake, he's still thinking in terms of what's the best way to do it.
Right.
You know,
That you could have tricked me with one line.
better.
You didn't
Yes,
have to. Yeah. It's
you did
it's
it
awesome.
wrong. Yeah,
And so
it's
that's just
amazing.
Borges is now he brings us to this thing where we see and I love this stuff because I am endlessly intrigued by mystery and this kind of idea that Borges brings up a lot, that there is this knowledge that is uh held by the few, never
Hmm.
you know never communicated openly, and it's for and it's power. It's very powerful knowledge, and that this kind of thing exists. And um our main character here obviously has that same kind of curiosity, and that curiosity is his downfall.
Yes.
Also,
Um,
um,
yeah.
if somebody is, you don't underestimate somebody who is a killer, a murderer, and has your name and has your number. You know what I mean?
But he
So,
is
and
just so arrogant that he does not, for 1 second, believe that this guy is ahead of him. And during the bad guy speech, um, he says, like, I was always 1 step ahead of you. And it feels almost like destiny. Like you were always down to come here to this labyrinth, and I was always supposed to kill you because I
right,
had it all planned out.
right.
Yes.
And I think it's cool how he talks about the next life, and well, in the next life, what in the next avatar, or maybe not the next avatar, but in a future avatar, a future embodiment of their lifetimes, what's going to happen? Well, Red Scarlac is going to kill him again.
Hmm.
It's not that it's going to be reversed, and like next time maybe Lon Road is going to, I'm gonna get you next time. You're not gonna do this to me again. It's, well, this is how it is, and we're stuck in this cycle, and it's this cyclic, unbreakable, uh, doomed to repeat kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I think more. I mean, there's so many aspects to Borges. It's very cool that he can endlessly explore these kind of ideas. We could talk about labyrinths in reference to Borges, and talk about it so many different ways, more ways than I could ever have come up with on my own just in a
Hmm.
conversation.
Yeah.
And same thing with cyclic existence, that kind of thing, and even exploring uh unknown knowledge, mysterious
Hmm.
uh mysteries that are for the few, and
Yeah.
that most don't know. I mean, he's an amazing intellectual jackdaw that just
He really
goes
is.
off, goes off, and just that sees so many different ways to work into a huge idea. I mean, it is a huge idea, multifaceted, but
Hmm.
it's just the mind of this guy. Beautiful
Yes,
stuff. You
it
got
is.
anything to add, Yasmin?
Yes, just one short thing.
Sure.
So we talked about how the detective talked about a little bit about how the hypothesis came before and all of that. And I just wanted to bring up a big theme that we see a lot in Borges and that we see a lot in the Library of Babel. which is meaning from chaos, how we construct meaning from chaos, and how
Right.
this detective is sort of looking for the clues that he essentially looking for specific things, and those are his clues. And while some things were absolutely random in how these crimes were committed and what happened in them, he still found the patterns and the meaning in those things. So I
Right.
think
So
that's the big thing
do
here.
you think, are you pointing to like a confirmation bias with that?
Kind of,
That
yeah.
he has like a
Or
confirmation bias, but you know, I saw it like, yeah, maybe just that he's not really that good of a detective
yes,
because he's not
absolutely.
trying to like.
Especially saying things aren't this isn't interesting, so we can't have that hypothesis. So I'm just going to look at the things that I'm interested in. But
Right.
I saw it a lot. Yeah, he's not a great detective, but also there were all these random things, and he could have looked at any of them. If you're a good detective, you're going to look at the more simple
Right.
solution. But he just found his own patterns and the meaning of the crime in a way, and that because he was looking at that, that is what happened, because this guy was watching him and looking for what he looked for. So I just think it's a
Right.
really interesting
It is interesting.
dynamic.
And yeah, I think that with that, that's what kind of kicks me into more of a self-referential way when I'm thinking about this, because I'm like, how much do I, kind of really go towards what is interesting to me and what I,
Oh yeah.
you know, what I want to explore, when there is powerful things just as valid, maybe full of explanation and things that would give me some kind of real meaning, or knowing something, like a real piece of knowledge, almost wisdom, something like that, that I'm just totally, overlooking, looking the other way, totally, ignoring,
Yeah, but
you
at the
know.
same time, when you're seeing the world a certain way and you believe in something, that's also beautiful, because that becomes your reality. And
Right.
it's, yeah, it is sort of
Well,
confirmation
he
bias,
did.
but at the same time, we all have to see the world in some way,
Right.
right?
I like that. I like that for sure. And he didn't begrudge himself at the end there, uh, being tricked, and that being his end. And he didn't begrudge Red Scarlet for it either, except for that he could have done it better. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
like in the next life, I'm gonna keep seeing things my way. But you
Right.
could do better when it comes to labyrinth.
You got me, but you could have got me better. I was
Yes.
like, wait, maybe don't get got. Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yasmin.
Love it. Thank you, Noah.
Borges rocks. The Death and the
Cool.
Compass. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave me some comments, if anything. We'll continue a discussion in the box. All good. See you next time, Yasmin.
Bye.
Bye.